That's what I mean.
Did you already see it? All right, let's go over the quiz real quick.
Do it.
You don't have to submit it before we go over it. So, all right, question one. So PPEs. So this is mostly a question for my D1 students in the lab. You guys are already used to being on clinic and wearing all your stuff. But it's a big thing, so if you screw up on your PPEs, it'll affect your grades. So the answer is both statements are true. Okay, how many pieces of paper do you need? 5. So yeah, you can count them out. You have your resting pH, your average resting pH. You have the 2 parotids, your sublingual, and then the one that the video forgot was the stimulated pH. Question 3. All right, how is average pH measured? Is it a mathematical average? No, it's just kind of it's not really an average, it's more of a mix of the saliva that's in the mouth. So you just get your patient to spit into the cup before they think about their saliva and start stimulating it, and then that's your average pH. Okay, so it's kind of a misnomer, it's not really an average. So why is it not an average? So why can't you just measure from the 2 parotids and the sublingual and just take a mathematical average? Right, so they have different flows. So you're going to get more from one gland and less from another, so it's not equal from all those sources. Question 5. All right, so the stimulated saliva that your patient or your partner spits into the cup, what tests are you going to use for that stimulated saliva? Buffering, stimulated pH, flow rate. Yeah, there you go. I was blanking. Okay, everybody get all those?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. All right, we're going to go through this fairly quickly, and then from here we'll go up to the east wing, and we'll actually try these on each other. And then, so that's all been the good news so far. Afterwards, you get to write a report and with your results and kind of tell me what you think your caries risk is, and compare that to your previous caries experience. So if your tests say that you have a really high caries risk and you haven't had a filling in your whole life, well, then kind of talk me through that on your paper. It should be short, less than a page or so. I don't want to read a book about your caries life. And I'll make an assignment in Canvas so that you'll have the written assignment, so it'll be a little bit clearer for you. Shouldn't be terribly difficult. All right, so for today, these are our lecture objectives. So you should know what the normal values for the different salivary tests are, know what the caries screen measures, know the order of the tests and why it's important to do it in that order. Know how to do the tests. So not a terribly difficult lecture today. So again, PPs are important. So they're important for a number of different reasons. I mean, your health is supremely important. Your patient's health is supremely important. The accreditation of the school kind of depends on us doing this correctly. Also, if we screw this up, then they can pull our accreditation. So it's to be annoying. All right, these are the things that you're going to be using today. So you have your little medicine cup and your little saliva check buffer, and your pH indicator, and then the carry screen meter over there on the other side. Okay, so you will need to tear that little piece of paper into 5 separate pieces. Come on, button. Okay, these are your the salivary tests. And so doing them in order is important. If you start checking your patient's flow rate before you check their stimulated their resting pH, you're going to have to wait about 20 minutes for their resting pH to come back down to a resting pH level. So you want to do them in order. If you have the patient chew on the unflavored gum for 5 minutes, and then you try to check their biofilm, I mean, you might have just kind of scrubbed off all their biofilm also. I had a dental student who was really proud of their patient because their patient had just a really low biofilm result. And so we talked a little bit. It turns out the student had just finished the prophy, so there was the biofilm. So yeah, and then your patients are going to do funny things also. So your patients want to impress you. There's a patient who came in with he just had caries everywhere, but the dental student did his test, and he had a really low biofilm, and his pH was really high, and it just didn't match his caries experience. So after talking a little bit and asking some leading questions, it turns out that the patient had just rinsed their mouth while they're in the parking lot before they came in because they wanted their mouth to be all fresh and clean for their dental student, which is very considerate, but it threw the test off. So this is the order you'll want to do your tests. So check your average resting pH first, then check your biofilm, then we'll chew on the wax, get the salivary flow rate and the stimulated pH and the buffering capacity. So there's other tests as well that we've had in the past. We don't have the materials now. There was a little pregnancy test kind of thing where you drip a little bit of stimulated saliva on a little reader and then watch for the pink line to come up. And so that one we was checking for strep mutans. And then you can also culture the bacteria. Take a sample of the bacteria and culture it out onto a plate, and you can count colonies of strep mutans and lactobacillus to your eyes cross. Okay? So make sure you do them in the correct order so you get proper results. So the resting pH, your average resting pH is just before you start talking to your patient about saliva and they start thinking about it, just have them spit into the cup, and then you can measure that with the pH paper, and that will be your average resting pH. And then to check the individual salivary ducts, we probably don't have little cotton forceps. It makes it a little bit easier. Just hold a little piece of paper in your fingers and touch it up against the parotid ducts or underneath the tongue for the sublingual, submandibular gland. Okay. So the carry screen meter measures how much karyogenic bacteria you have in your mouth. It doesn't do it directly. The karyogenic bacteria use ATP to bring nutrients into the cell. Normally, non-acidouric bacteria. By the way, what is acidouric? No, acidouric is the ability to live in an acidic environment. Acidogenic is the ability to produce acid. So your non-acidouric bacteria they're swimming around in a environment that's about a pH of 0.8 or 6.8, and the nutrients kind of go down. So it's more basic on the outside of the cell than it is on the inside of the cell, and nutrients just flow down that little pH gradient naturally. That's just the way they want to go. So all the bacteria has to do is sit there, and the nutrients come flooding in, and they're happy. In an acidic environment, the nutrients are all want to stay on the outside of the cell. So the bacteria, the acidouric bacteria, use ATP to force the nutrients against that pH gradient. So acidouric bacteria produce a lot more ATP. So we can measure ATP and then extrapolate that because there's so much ATP, there must be a lot of acidouric bacteria. And so it's not measuring the bacteria directly, it's just measuring the metabolites that the bacteria use. But the Carey screen meter, it'll if there's any ATP in the sample that you wipe off of the teeth, it mixes that with a photoreactive enzyme. And actually, it's the same enzyme that fireflies use to do their little firefly thing. So every time you test somebody's bacteria, you're killing a little firefly. No, not really. But it's the same enzyme. Okay, so the ATP mixes with that firefly enzyme and produces light, and the Carey screen meter measures that light, and then it decides how much ATP is there by how much light is produced. So the little light receptor is down here in the bottom of the Carey screen meter. So if you drop in your little sample and then turn the meter on the side and all the sample runs up here to the top, you're not going to measure anything at all. So the Carey screen meter has to be straight up and down when you measure the sample so that the sample stays in the bottom. Okay? And then next we have, so how do you make it work? So you got to turn it on. Depending on which Carey screen meter you have, because we have some older versions and some newer versions, but it'll take up to 60 seconds to calibrate. Some of them are faster, none of them are slower, but some of them are faster. But it takes at least 60 seconds to calibrate. While it's calibrating, don't open it. If the meter doesn't count down, make sure your lid is closed. Make sure there's not a little sample tube in there already. Yeah. So turn it on, and then you're going to swab the lingual of the lower anteriors. And so when you do that, you have to do it like you mean it. So you can't just kind of wave your swab over the teeth a little bit. You got to get that biofilm off the tooth and onto the swab. So make one nice firm pass on the lingual of those lower anteriors. Try to stay above the gingiva, because if you remember from our first lecture, we have different bacteria that are in the gingiva, different bacteria that are on the teeth. So try to stay on the teeth. You had a question in the middle?
Oh, I was going to ask if you had a lingual retainer. Does it correct you?
So a lingual retainer will collect biofilm, but I mean, it's your lingual retainer, or it's the patient's lingual retainer. It's their biofilm, so it may have more biofilm, but it's their caries risk. So yes, it affects it, but no, it doesn't throw it off. It's probably just going to give them a little higher score. So for your patients who don't have lower anteriors, then you can pick another site. The buckle of the maxillary molars is a good site, or the buckle of the anterior incisors is another good site. Just be consistent. So for those patients, you'll just want to make sure next time that they come in and you do it, that you use the same site. You don't want to be comparing incisors to molars or apples to oranges or any of those kind of things. Okay, once you get that swab, you put the little swab back into the little test tube and break the top of the test tube, and that's going to let those reagents go down in there. You only have about 45 seconds to break that test tube and mix it up and get it into the meter, because the little firefly enzyme doesn't last forever. It only lasts for a short amount of time. So after about 45 seconds, you're going to get a lower and lower reading for that same sample. Okay, so once you've mixed the reagents, then you can open your meter, drop the tube in there. Make sure you drop the whole tube in there. We don't want somebody's saliva going on the inside of the meter. That would be gross. So put the entire tube into the meter, close the lid, and press the OK button. And again, you got to hold it straight up and down because the sensor is down at the bottom. You lay it on the counter in a safe way, and all the sample flows away from the reader, so it's not going to work. Okay. So again, the different meters have different countdowns, but usually it's about 15 seconds, and then voila, you have a magic reading. So this sample got a reading of 2,195 reflective light units. So what does that mean? If you're below 1,500, you're probably low caries risk. Above 1,500, you're probably high caries risk. It's not a linear scale. It's more of a logarithmic scale. So if you have a reading of 3,500, it doesn't really mean that much different than a reading of 9,999. It's more of a yes or no thing. Okay, salivary flow rate. So you have your patient chew on the unflavored gum for about 5 minutes. Some people think that this unflavored gum is wax. That would be rude. Why would we have you chew on wax? So even though it might look like wax and taste like wax, this is unflavored gum. Just So anyway, chew on the gum for 5 minutes. Spit all of your saliva into the cup. Sometimes you have to convince your patients that you really want them to spit their saliva out. They're like, really? You say, yes, we love saliva. And so make sure they spit it all into the cup. Once the 5 minutes is done, you divide the amount of saliva you have, how many milliliters of saliva, by 5, and that will give you your milliliters per minute. Your normal value is about 0.7 milliliters per minute. If you're much below 0.7, you're probably kind of dry. If you've got more than, especially if you've got more than 1 milliliter per minute, you're probably okay. But 0.7 is kind of the cutoff. Okay, so don't throw away that saliva. You're going to use that same saliva for your stimulated pH. So you just dip your last piece of paper into that stimulated saliva for your stimulated pH. It's a very simple test. And then your buffering capacity. There'll be a little pipette that comes in this saliva check buffer strip kit. So you have a little pipette and you have a little strip. You get a little drop of the stimulated saliva, drop it on each colored square, and then watch the color change. And Then there's a numeric value for the color that the square changes to, and you add those three up, and that'll give you your buffering capacity for your saliva. So 10 is above 10 is low caries risk, below 10 is increased caries risk. So this is the strep mutans test that we checked for before. We won't be doing the test for a number of different reasons. First of all, the school doesn't carry it anymore, so it makes it very difficult. Secondly, because there's so many different bacteria that can cause caries, testing for one specific bacteria may be interesting, but it may not be terribly helpful. So just because you don't have any strep mutans probably doesn't necessarily mean you're at a low caries risk. This would be a control, and then under the T there, if there's a line that shows up, that would be a positive test, and then they would be positive for strep mutans. Right? These are your normal values, so compare your values to these values, and then you can kind of decide where your caries risk falls. Okay? Clear? Ready to do this on each other? All right, so let's go upstairs. I'll be right behind you as soon as I get my stuff together, and we'll do this. Christine said she's going to bring us the supplies, so clean up, and then I'll be right behind you.
We're just doing it Are we just doing it on one partner?
Yeah.
Like, just,
So just pair up,
okay.
and then we do it on each other. It's really,
We do it on each other.
yeah, it's really hard to do it on yourself.
Okay. No, but I'm saying like doing it on each other, but like do we have to do it on a partner, clean the chair, swap, like that?